Today is Thursday, February 11th, and we are on our last day, day 4 of PSL number 5 before our quiz tomorrow. And today is just an I-STEP constructive response practice, which we do have I-STEP constructive response coming up in just a few weeks. Just a little over 2 weeks to be exact. So the question today says the graph shows the relationship between the number of hours studied by students, like you guys, for a final test and then their percentage score on the test. So on one axis down here you can see the number, and it's not very easy to read, but the number of hours studied, and we are comparing that to the final percent score that they got on their test. So the first part, part A, wants us to draw a line that best models the data. When we draw this line, we want to make sure that we are kind of like halfway on either side. Like down here we have about the same number of dots showing as we do on top. So if I look at this line I just drew, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 dots that are showing on this side, but on the top I have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so it's not really as great as it could be. So I'm going to try drawing it one more time. That's not good. But it's just something you're going to want to play with until you kind of feel like you've got about the same on one side as you do on the other. So now that we have our line, your language arts teachers have asked that we start practicing the RACES acronym with you guys when we're writing anything. So because they're in this question part B asking us to write or answer a question, we're going to actually do a very, very small version of RACES where we restate our question and then answer it and then back it up with some extra information, because our first sentence isn't always going to give all of the details that our brain is thinking. So we're going to cite, extend, and summarize. And I've done an example for you here. The main point that we're getting at, though, is that when we look at this slope of this line, our slope, we can tell that it's going up. So the more hours we study, the higher our test score. So that's what we're going to focus on when we write our answer. So here's just an example of what you might say. You can see that restated is in like the turquoise. The answer is in this black part drifting onto the yellow. And then my cite is in pink, extend in orange, and summarize in that greenish yellow color. This is just one example. Of course, there's not a right or wrong answer, but I really want you to be thinking about using RACES even when you're describing your math. Part C says write an equation that represents the line you drew in Part A and define the variables in your equation. So when we write an equation in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, we have two variables that we need to come up with. So our m is our slope, and our b is our y-intercept, aka what does y equal when x is 0? So to find our first one, slope, we want to do kind of a rise over run, and to do that we're really going to have to estimate some points on this graph. So it looks like this point is pretty obvious, and this graph is so tiny it's hard to see. But this point right here looks like a good one. So it's at 1 hour. I'm going to erase this for a second. It's at 1 hour of studying and their score was approximately a 50%. And then we can pick another coordinate, and I'm going to just erase this line a little bit so I can really see this point. Are there any on the line? not too much. So let's do this one right here. We've got 4.5 hours studied with a time of almost 90, like an 88. So to find the slope, we're going to use our slope formula. So we're going to use our slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you want to name your coordinates xy1, xy2, and then start substituting. So after substituting, we get 88 minus 50 over 4.5 minus 1. So now we're going to simplify. So this reduces down to 30 over 3.5. And if we wanted to take that even further, we would get 8 point, it's kind of a hairy decimal, so 30 divided by 3.5. We get, let's just do it to a tenth. We get 8.57, so because 7 is higher than 5, we do want to round this number up, so it's going to become 8.6. So that's going to be our M. That was a lot of work, but that's how we get our M. So our M is equal to 8.6. Next we need to find our B, or our value of Y, when X crosses this line right here. So the value where that line is going to approximately cross the x-axis. So I've extended the line all the way across the x-axis, and it looks like it's approximately landing at about 40%. So I'm just estimating, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So now we can use our slope-intercept y equals mx plus b, and we can substitute in our m and our b. So our equation, our estimated equation for this line could be y equals 8.6x plus 40. And if we were going to define the variables, m is representing the amount that we're going this way for each hour of studying. So this would be our percentage increase on our score. And then our B, the value of where we cross the x-axis, is going to be representing our absolute lowest score test value if we didn't study at all. Lowest score possible without studying. So even a person who has just been in class, didn't do any studying, should be able to come in and at least get a 40 without doing any studying. And that is what it means to define the variables. So part D kind of, I feel like they're asking us the same question, but what are the values of the slope and the y-intercept, and what do they represent? So going back to what we talked about before, pulling right off there, I just elaborated a tiny bit. Our slope is 8.6, and what that meant is that for each hour that you studied, you're going to get like 8.6% higher. So if you studied for 2 hours, you get 8.6 plus 8.6 on top of your 40 or whatever you start out at. And then the 40 represents the absolute lowest score that somebody's going to get, even if they spend no time studying at all. So that was your PSL constructive response practice for today. Make sure you get all that down. Really try to think about these things and think about how you would write the answer, because in just over 2 weeks you're going to be doing this yourself, whether you want to or not. Not whether you're able to, you're going to have to. So, I mean, this is something you really want to be thinking about doing independently, or at least practicing independently, and then maybe comparing it to what we're getting for our PSL answer. But this PSL, of course, is due tomorrow, and you can hold on to it because you get to use it on your quiz. Tomorrow's quiz is going to be over volume, and I think you guys are going to do great. As long as we can keep those formulas straight, we're going to do awesome. So keep this PSL handy and make sure you get it out tomorrow so that we can do great on our quiz.